Kirby games are notable for their bright, cheery, and upbeat atmosphere. The colorful graphics, peppy music, and cuteness is a breath of fresh air from the dark, gritty, realistic tone that many games have nowadays. However, any game hero needs to experience some conflict, and Kirby has come across many dark and evil foes who have threatened to strip Kirby's peace and happiness. We already did a video ranking the morality of the Kirby villains, but today we're hoping that Kirby found and ate a really good lawyer, because it's time to battle his foes in the courtroom. Hey guys, I'm Brad with One Up Binge, and today we're sentencing Kirby villains for their crimes. For the sake of this list, we're only going to be looking at the Kirby villains and their crimes pertaining to the game series. Second, we're going to be focusing on villains in the Kirby games, which are the primary antagonist that disqualifies characters such as Meta Knight, Susie, the three Mage Sisters, and Taranza, who have only appeared as secondary villains. Finally, we're only going to be including the crimes the characters have definitely committed in the games. This excludes Galactic Knight, who has a backstory of being a very powerful and threatening foe, but has not committed any of his crimes on screen. With that out of the way, let's tilt and tumble into our list and put these baddies behind bars. Let's start with Kirby's most iconic and persistent antagonist, King Dedede. King Dedede is kind of hard to convict for a few reasons. First, while King Dedede was seen as a much bigger threat in the early entries, he seems to have mellowed out a lot more in recent years. He seems to have more of a friendly rivalry with Kirby, and even works alongside him on many occasions. Second, even when he is a villain in a game, it's not always King Dedede's fault. This poor guy has been possessed and used as a puppet more times than even Bowser, and as such, we're going to be disqualifying any crimes King Dedede committed while being possessed by another being. This helps his criminal record a lot, but that doesn't mean he's totally off the hook. King Dedede is still responsible for many heinous actions, such as stealing all the food from the other residents of Dreamland. Not only is this theft, but it could have led to famine on Popstar, which would have resulted in a lot of deaths. On top of that, Dedede has a short temper and often swings around his hammer at anyone who opposes him. Considering the size and power of Dedede's hammer, we're also going to convict him of assault with a deadly weapon. While we wouldn't go as far as to say King Dedede wants anyone dead or even that hurt, but considering his position as a king, we definitely think we can add gross negligence to his list of actions. For these reasons, we're going to sentence King Dedede to 30 years in prison. We would be more willing to give him a lighter sentence if it wasn't for nearly causing famine. Like, it was a long time ago, but he did this twice, in Kirby's Dreamland 1 and 2, so we're actually being pretty lenient, all things considered. Next is Magolor. Much like King Dedede, Magolor has gone through somewhat of a redemption arc, turning himself around from his villainous ways. That's all well and good, but we still need to take a look into Magolor's past and unearth some of his more dubious actions. Before arriving on Popstar, Magolor was attempting to steal the Master Crown to control the universe. That already puts him on trial for attempted theft and hostile takeover in one action. He then tricked Kirby and his friends to help him retrieve the Master Crown before attempting to do the same thing again, thus giving him 2 more counts of the same action. All things considered, we will sentence Magolor to 5 years in prison. We're letting him off the hook a little, since he had a redemptive arc in later games. Also, as severe as Magolor's actions would have been had his plans been carried out, he wasn't even remotely successful at anything he attempted, so it's not like too many people would have gotten hurt. Next is Queen Sectonia. Once a kind and peaceful ruler, Queen Sectonia's personality got a lot darker after being corrupted by the Dimensional Mirror. This led to Queen Sectonia to abusing dark magic and transforming herself into a giant wasp. Things only got worse as Queen Sectonia began enslaving the residents of her kingdom to work for and worship her. Queen Sectonia also took measures to make sure no one could stop her, such as kidnapping and possessing Dedede's mind upon believing him to be Popstar's hero. Thankfully, Queen Sectonia was mistaken, and Kirby came in to thwart her plot after Sectonia attempted to murder Kirby with a large energy beam. Queen Sectonia was vaporized at the end of Kirby Triple Deluxe, but we personally would sentence her to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Queen Sectonia is dangerous and guilty of a lot of crimes, but we have to remember she was corrupted by the Dimensional Mirror. This makes us believe that genuine rehabilitation could have been possible had she gone through the right treatment. Given what Queen Sectonia was capable of, we'd still give her a life sentence in case we're being too optimistic on that front. Now let's move on to Highness, the main antagonist of Kirby Star Allies. Highness is the leader of the Jambastion cult, who's attempting to resurrect the Dark Lord Void Termina. Much like Queen Sectonia, Termina. Highness was once celebrated by his followers, before being corrupted by an outside force that turned him into an evil tyrant. Highness physically abuses his followers, particularly the Mage Sisters, for screwing up under his jurisdiction. Highness also tries to kill Kirby, as well as sacrifice himself and his followers to bring back Void Termina. Highness's actions may have been terrible, but surprisingly, we're gonna let him walk free. Hear us out. Highness was corrupted by the Jamba Heart, which was the cause of all his evil actions. If we're not charging DDD for his crimes while possessed, then we feel it's only fair to apply the same logic to Highness. Also, since Highness is reformed like Magolor, he's no longer a threat to Kirby or the other Popstar residents. Magolor didn't commit his crimes under corruption or possession, which is why we still gave him a light sentence, but Highness was legitimately not in control of himself. Congratulations, Highness, you walk out of this countdown a free mage. Next is DeRoach. Despite his confusing name, DeRoach is not a roach, and is instead a mouse, who is the leader of a gang of thieves known as the Squeak Squad. DeRoach's initial goal is to steal a treasure chest containing infinite power, but after being thwarted by Kirby, he once again changes his ways and becomes an ally. DeRoach's one and only crime really is stealing Kirby's cake, which he gives back to Kirby at the end of the game. Considering his reformation and lack of any severe harm, DeRoach is another enemy who we're considering letting off the hook. However, considering how much we know Kirby loves food, we're gonna have him pay $100 in pain and suffering. All's well that ends well, sure, but DeRoach should have really thought twice about stealing food from the hungriest hero in video games. Now we have Marks. Alright, this is a little confusing because Marks was initially good, but for some undisclosed reason turned evil. Then Marks apparently was killed by Kirby and Kirby Superstar, but somehow returns as a DLC ally and Kirby Star allies. With that confusing sequence of events aside, what did Marks actually do as a villain? Marks is another character dedicated to world conquest and tricks Kirby into helping him achieve that goal by summoning the wish-granting comet known as Nova. While world domination is certainly a nefarious act, we will give Marks credit in that he did not resort to any violent acts to achieve this goal. Not directly, anyway. Marks did trick the sun and moon into fighting each other in order for Kirby to summon the Nova comet in the first place, so maybe we can classify that under creating a public disturbance? Either way, we're sentencing Marks to 10 years in prison. He may be sneaky, power-hungry, and inconsiderate, but he wasn't quite as destructive as other Kirby villains. Now we have President Max Prophet Haltman. President Haltman is one of Kirby's more tragic enemies, as he was a genuinely respectable scientist who was working on a machine known as the Star Dream that had the potential to grant wishes. After a malfunction, Haltman's daughter, Susanna, disappeared, leading Haltman to continue the project to wish to see his daughter again. However, working on the computer so much corrupted Haltman's mind, leading him to eventually turn his motivations into, you guessed it, world domination. Had Haltman succeeded in his plans, his new world would be very bleak indeed, turning Popstar into a mechanical wasteland and leaving a lot of death and destruction in his wake. Haltman also plotted to brainwash Popstar's remaining residents into becoming slaves to help further his company. Later in the game, Haltman's soul was found inside the supercomputer, where he was depicted as the kind and respectable scientist he used to be, before the Star Dream corrupted his mind. For that reason, we will give Haltman a life sentence with the possibility of parole. Much like Queen Sectonia, this is another case where Haltman was corrupted by an outside force, but due to the severity of his potential crimes, we still need to give him a life sentence to avoid any potential danger. So, best behavior, Haltman, and maybe you'll be free again. Now we have Dark Nebula. This is actually pretty tough because we don't know much about what Dark Nebula is, his motivations, or his history, other than he was apparently locked in a treasure chest for years before DeRoach opened it. We can say that Dark Nebula is definitely guilty of possession and kidnapping, and we could possibly get him with an attempted murder charge for attacking Kirby. All things considered, we will sentence Dark Nebula to 15 years in prison. We think Dark Nebula has the potential to do a lot worse, but since his motivations are never really explained, we don't know the extent of what that would be. Keep an eye on this one even after release. Next is Dark Mind. Appearing in Kirby in the Amazing Mirror, Dark Mind is a nefarious force who seeks domination over Mirror World. That's about all we know about him. His only other crime, other than hostile takeover, is unethical cloning of creatures to create an army of evil minions. That's bad, but it's not on the level of brainwashing, which happens a lot with Kirby villains. So maybe he'll share a cell with Dark Nebula, as Dark Mind is also sentenced to 15 years in prison. Just take down any mirrors in the prison Dark Mind stays in. Now we have Yin Yarn, the antagonist of Kirby's epic yarn. Yin Yarn is out for, surprise, surprise, world domination. Typical motivation, but Yin Yarn doesn't have a creative way of going about it, as he transforms the residents of Dreamland into yarn. Now, is this a crime? If someone turned you into a ball of yarn, how could you sue them in a court of law? We'll classify classify this as abuse of power because Yin Yarn is technically abusing his magic powers to do this, but we have to admit that is kind of a stretch. One crime Yin Yarn committed, which is much easier to define, is kidnapping, which he has more than one account of. He captures Kirby, Meta Knight, and King Dedede and brings them to Patchland to prevent any opposition from taking over Dreamland. For this and world domination, Yin Yarn knitted himself a prison sentence of 15 years. We would knock it down to 10 since turning everyone into yarn isn't the worst thing ever, but the multiple accounts of kidnapping makes us think Yin Yarn deserves a little more time behind bars. Bars made of yarn, that is. Next is Specto Elf Ellis, the main antagonist in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Specto Elf Ellis not only is Kirby's newest foe, but also one with the longest list of crimes. Specto Elf Ellis is another villain who uses the power of possession, this time to possess the members of the Beast Pack, and King Dedede of course, into fighting Kirby and capturing the Waddle Dees for forced labor. That's already brainwashing, enslavement, animal abuse, and possession all in one, and we're not done yet. Once Specto Elf Ellis' plans are stopped by Kirby, the alien created a giant wormhole to have the Forgotten Land collide with Popstar. This would have not only destroyed the planets, but destroyed all life on both. It is true Specto Elf Ellis apparently reforms himself into becoming Soul Forgo in the postgame, but unsurprisingly this turns out to be another trick that leads to him trying to murder Kirby again. Specto Elf Ellis easily gets the death penalty, no question about it. Not only are his crimes numerous and severe, but his fake attempts at reformation blew his chances at leniency. Now we have Drossia. Appearing in Kirby Canvas Curse, Drossia, similarly to Yin Yarn, isn't looking to destroy or take over Dreamland so much as she's looking to give an aesthetic makeover, this time turning it into a painting. Turning Dreamland into a painting would freeze all life and development, so while we can't call this murder, we do think it's a form of false imprisonment. Drossia also uses her dark magic to turn Kirby into a ball to prevent him from stopping her. We can call this an abuse of her magic power, but Kirby is used to transforming into different things, so this plan isn't as clever as she intended. We'll sentence Drossia to 12 years in prison. Her goals and actions are similar to that of Yin Yarn, but she doesn't resort to kidnapping multiple times, so she gets a slightly lighter sentence. Now is the computer that corrupted President Haltman, Stardream. As we said before, Haltman was corrupted by Stardream, which led to him going mad and committing crimes. This already makes Stardream guilty of brainwashing, but let's continue. Stardream's ultimate goal upon being activated was to wipe out all life, not just a single planet, life everywhere. Somehow over time, Stardream developed a mind of its own and grew a hatred of organic living beings, both for unclear reasons. What is clear to us is that Stardream is sentenced to life in prison. Even if he didn't get very far, Stardream still strived for the extinction of all living beings and brainwashed a perfectly respectable and brilliant scientist to accomplish that goal. This computer is probably better off behind bars, if not in the scrapyard, for the sake of every living creature. Now we have Void Termina. This is the mastermind behind the events of Kirby's Star Allies. We let Highness off the hook in this game, but Void Termina is another story. This dark and destructive deity traveled across the universe, terrorizing those who didn't worship him. If you thought Stardream's goal of wanting all life dead was bad, Void Termina does the computer one better and wants total annihilation of the universe in general. He also took several steps toward this goal by murdering many before being imprisoned in the Jamba Heart. Void Termina was seemingly destroyed by Kirby at the end of the game, but we think that's a fitting punishment, as we would also sentence Void Termina to the death penalty. We're not sure what this deity gets out of destroying the universe, but does it really matter? We can't imagine any sort of rationale would convince us to give Void Termina a lighter sentence. The next spot goes to 002. Appearing in Kirby's Dreamland 3, Zero invaded Popstar with his minions on quest to possess everyone in Dreamland and become its new ruler. He even attempts to murder Kirby once he and Gooey eliminated the rest of the dark matter. While it initially seemed a different member of the dark matter species was the one behind the events of Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, collecting all the Crystal Shards in the game reveals 02 was the true mastermind. This floating eye was the new and improved version of Zero, who brainwashed many of the residents of both Popstar and Ripple Planet to dominate both worlds. Out of all of Kirby's enemies, 02 may have been the most sneaky and effective, staying in the shadows and tricking Kirby into thinking dark matter was the real threat. So we're sentencing Zero to life in prison. World domination is par for the course for Kirby's villains, but the amount of brainwashing and mental gymnastics 02 went through to dominate multiple planets is noteworthy and contemptible. Now we have Nightmare, also known as Lord Nightmare Nightmare, and the Nightmare Wizard. Nightmare is easily one of Kirby's most iconic and recognizable enemies, appearing as the final boss in Kirby's Adventure. In this game, Nightmare tried taking over Dreamland by gaining control of the Fountain of Dreams and spreading nightmares throughout the land. Yet another character set on world conquest and his use of dark magic is reprehensible. Nightmare reappears once again in Kirby Mass Attack, where he plans to exact his revenge by destroying Kirby. Nightmare gets 25 years and the slammer. Attempted murder and world domination are certainly bad, but given the extent of the crimes others have committed in the Kirby games, Nightmare's actions really were only the tip of the iceberg. Necrodius from Kirby Mass Attack is next. Necrodius is both a really confusing villain and a really simple one. He hates light and wants to dim Popstar for being the brightest star in the galaxy. To do this, he splits up Kirby into 10 entities and kills 9 of them, knowing Kirby would try to stop him. So, is that murder? If he left Kirby alive with the means to reassemble himself, then not really. Also, what crime does making Popstar darker fall under? Probably world domination, considering he and his Skull Gang subordinates thrive in the darkness. After much deliberation, we're sentencing Necrodius to 20 years in a very well-lit prison cell. Since Necrodius seemed content on forcing darkness upon everyone, we think it's only fitting that we force light onto him during his time in prison. Maybe this will deter Necrodius if he gets any more bright or dark ideas upon his release. Finishing off our list, we have Dark Matter Blade, the antagonist of Kirby's Dream Land 2. Dark Matter Blade possesses King Dedede, what a shot, can't believe it, and destroys the rainbow bridges connecting the islands of Dreamland together. This definitely puts him on trial for both possession and property damage. Considering the motivations of the other Dark Matter species characters, we wouldn't be shocked if Dark Matter Blade was also after world domination. Might seem harsh, but we're giving Dark Matter Blade life in prison. If this was only for his crimes, we might be more lenient. However, Dark Matter Blade paved the road for all the other members of the Dark Matter species that followed, which have been a consistent threat to Dreamland, so we're also taking that into account. Dark Matter reappears as a boss in Kirby Mass Attack years later, where he tries to kill Kirby out of revenge, and that doesn't help his sentencing either. Alrighty, that is it. Let us know in the comment section if you agree with our sentencing. Was justice served? Tell us in the comment section what your sentences would be. And if you need a one-up, make sure to hit that notification bell and binge more of our videos. Thanks for watching.